space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission: to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before.
Hi, my name is Garen, Daly, and I'm the festival director for the Boston Science Fiction Film Festival. And tonight we're going to be talking about the Star Trek franchise, how it started off in 1966, and now 50 years later, that 5-year mission has come closer to 50 years. And it has gone through many iterations and many different shapes and forms as befits a galactic adventure. And joining us today is Ben Myers and Michael Eyre. Ben is someone we met at SF-47. This film is A Lone Star Love. Ben, welcome to the show.
Garen, it's great to be here. I mean, Trek, and I've got to be here. It's like the bat phone rang. Like I had to come. You know, this is great. It's great.
You're mixing up your metaphors with a bat phone.
Okay, we'll keep the franchises separate for today.
What do they call that thing that they communicate with? They communicate. Right?
You got tricorder, you got options. I could just press my handy dandy little, and
there you go.
Communicating that way,
Anyways, I'm glad you joined us. And also joining us is someone who's been with us before, Michael Eyre from Geek. Michael, welcome.
Well, thank you very much. I don't write much about Star Trek, but I am a huge Star Trek fan, and I'm currently enjoying Star Trek Picard. So yeah, color me a fan going way back.
You know, one of the things that I love the most about Star Trek is, and I was going to start this, when was your first exposure to Star Trek? I'll tell you what mine was. All right, so I grew up in Connecticut, and when I grew up in Connecticut, we didn't have NBC because we lived where we just there was no signal. It was way back, black and white TV stations. You only got a couple of things. I didn't find out about Star Trek till I went to college in 1968. Which is near the end of the Star Trek thing. And that was my first exposure. Ben, when did you first, when did Star Trek touch your universe?
Well, my father and my grandfather were big fans of the original series. So when The Next Generation was coming out, this was like, oh my God, this is like the return, this is a big moment. So my grandfather, this World War II vet, he was big into the latest technology of the day. So he got himself a VCR recorder where like you could record things off the TV. And he recorded every single episode of The Next Generation first run on VHS in order. Like tape one's got, the pilot, the first couple episodes. Well, a little later, and I'm sitting around the dinner table and in the reruns or the shows in first run, it's playing in the background, and I kind of discover this. I'm like in middle school, elementary school. These shoe boxes, this stacks of shoe boxes filled with beautiful VHS tapes in line, and I had this little tiny TV that had a VHS player built inside of it, about this big. We used it for like road trips in the car. I stole that and brought it into my room, and I would stay up till like 2 a.m. I just binged the whole thing through over like 2 weeks. I was just enthralled by the storytelling and the world and the possibility and the positive energy. So and plus my dad was a captain in the Navy, and he was losing his hair too. So I think that there was like some simpatico about him and Picard or something for me. But that was what started the whole romance for me with Star Trek. Really was Next Generation and those VHS tapes.
And Michael, what about you?
And Ben, you're sporting the Riker beard there, of course, as well. But
I get Riker for days. Riker and me were simpatico.
But yeah, like Ben, my father was a big fan of the original series, and we watched it on the UHF channels in the 80s, certainly. When Next Generation hit in the 90s, like many college students or post-college, I was living at home at the time, and my mother and I watched The Next Generation religiously every night that when UPN started playing them in reruns. we could watch it pretty much every night. And I did the same with DS9 and Voyager. Was devoted fan of those and watched them during their first run. Even through Enterprise, which is when I finally got my first apartment and all that, I did watch that show as well, as bad as that was. But yeah, my Star Trek cred runs pretty deep.
Well, one of the things I did when I started researching this is looked at the beginning of it and how it all started. And, you read all the quotes from Gene Roddenberry about how he based it not on Wagon Train, which was really popular back in the 60s, but it was based on Gulliver's Travels. And it was more of like, seeing a new world in a different kind of way and using that as a way to get tropes. But the person who actually made it happen was Lucille Ball, because she was the head of Desilu Studios. And apparently Roddenberry had done a thing called First Lieutenant, I think was the TV show, and she liked him. And so when he came with the thing, she got behind it and started it. And it seems to me that step that she made really set the tone for what Star Trek is. Because I think, and this is what one of the question I have for you, is it just my impression is that Star Trek has a way of trying to find the best in humanity. And that is one of the reasons why we're drawn to it. Is that a fair assessment, Ben?
I mean, definitely. I think there's a fundamental optimism, and that is part of the show's DNA, and also an ambition, right? I mean, it's assuming that we're gonna get to this place someday where everybody's fed, everybody's clothed, everybody has a purpose, and everybody can be self-actualized. We're hoping we get to that place, but that's a difficult place to get to. And I think that the idea that Lucille Ball is a visionary herself. I mean, a powerhouse comedian, of course, but a powerhouse producer, a very influential businesswoman. So for her to throw her weight behind the show, to get the show going, to provide the show the resource that it needs and the quality, because she was the number one name in television. I think that sent the franchise on the right direction, and to see another visionary in Gene Roddenberry, it says everything about where the show went.
Mike, what do you think about that assessment?
Well, I think Lucille Ball's role in things can't be overstated, because, of course, Star Trek broke a lot of ground with regard to having Lieutenant Uhura and the first interracial kiss and a lot of the things. I mean, obviously it had a very traditional male swashbuckling hero in Captain Kirk, but it also did a lot of firsts in television. And you feel like having a female producer set the tone that further franchises would imitate, including Brian Fuller, who does Star Trek Discovery, in introducing a lot of the LGBT community into his iteration of Star Trek. It's always got that groundbreaking, pushing the edge, pushing the envelope, and trying to, explore what humanity could be, not just from the standpoint of the utopian Federation and how it's got its food replicators to solve world starvation needs, but also just in the way that the society works.
You touched upon technology, which is a big thing within the Star Trek universe, and I want to talk about that. But we'll get into the tricorders and all that other kind of stuff. But I'm just wondering why, in the 23rd century or the 24th century, they could not find clothes that fit. Have you ever noticed that whenever Picard gets up, he goes, he straightens out his shirt. It's like he has to straighten out his shirt. I mean, come on, what's going on with that?
When I saw that, I thought that was just what you were supposed to do. I still do that. I still walk. I get up whenever I get up from a chair. Yeah. I get around to a chair like Riker does. I swing my legs over. This is how I learned how to be a human being. This is the way clothes are supposed to be. No, I don't know. I guess they've surpassed the need for fashion as a human concept in culture to be obsessed with, because everybody's just got these onesies going on. The human race, they're all very uniform. Every once in a while,
you get in the military.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, or paramilitary peace troopers, or whatever the Federation was enforcing its rule across the lands. But I guess for me, I'm obsessed with, like, when it comes to the costumes, the evolution of the insignia. and it going from, just a cloth kind of a thing to, next gen really nice, and then how that style slowly starts to shift. And I feel like it's literally emblematic of the way the show kind of changes. I really like tracking that insignia and the way that changes stylistically.
Huh. Well, one of the, it's when you talk about the track of the show, when you go back to the original series, we have a clip where, and it's the original Cons clip. And let's play this one clip, and we can talk about how the series and the franchise has developed over the years. I mean, first of all, the stunt double and the William Shatner, it's really easy to figure out who's who, and it's a really kind of vacant set. It's like, wow. I mean, it's kind of like bare minimum. But and I think when we get into Star Trek Next Generation, they were talking about $1 million per episode, which is pretty pricey back then. They really started developing the special effects and making the sets look really good. Was there a moment at any time when you started thinking that you could actually see what was going on during the filming rather than getting lost in the story?
I think that's probably the case with the first season of Star Trek The Next Generation. Had the same issues that we saw in that clip there. But you have to remember, too, Star Trek, the original series, it ran for 3 seasons. It was concurrent with Lost in Space, which also ran for 3 seasons. And it was a much more popular show, Lost in Space, than Star Trek. It got better ratings. So the Star Trek was not working with a huge budget and was not popular until after it was canceled. So, or was not as popular until after it was canceled. So, obviously that's going to be the case. And The Next Generation was a bit of a gamble on Paramount's part. So I think you definitely see the chintzy aspect of some of those first season episodes in The Next Generation. But then as soon as it gained popularity, all that went away. I mean, even just the bridge of The Next Generation Enterprise became much more immersive than, and the transporting technology, that, transporting people from the planet, and even just patenting tapping the communicator rather than the Motorola flip phone that Star Trek probably inspired. That's the kind of thing that brought you in and made it a little more immersive. Even the holodeck, which was patented by the Next Generation folks, was immersive technology.
I want to show a clip from Next Generation, and we'll show the clip. It's with Saul Rubinek and Nehemiah Persoff, and I'll explain to you one of the reasons why we want to show this clip. And if Mark, our director, will play the clip, we can look at it.
It's a mannequin of some sort.
This is not a mannequin. This is Data. This is formerly Lieutenant Commander Data of the Federation Starfleet, the only sentient android in existence.
It doesn't seem particularly sentient right now.
It's because it's playing a stupid little game with us.
Well, someone has certainly played a game on you, Fajo.
I don't find this amusing. I demand that you behave normally. Behave normally. I knew you could hear me!
It falls well.
I apologize for this.
Do not be upset, my friend. I'm having a delightful visit. Come along, Varia! You're much more fun than Fajo's new toy.
You'll regret this.
So that's a great clip. And, one of the things that Star Trek is known for is being able to get good actors in positions to really kind of beef up the storyline. Saul Rubinek is someone that I've loved for a long, long time as an actor, and will watch just about anything that's great in The Unforgiven. But the other actor is Nehemiah Persoff, who just recently died a couple of weeks back. And one of our team members is his son, Perry. And we thought that'd be a nice thing to be able to, show a clip and talk about the fact that his dad was in Star Trek Next Generation. And this is a clip that, Ben, you should introduce with a little bit of data in it, because we're still in the Star Trek Next Generation ethos. So can you prep this for us?
Oh yeah, well, one data moment to another. I mean, as if we didn't have enough data in that clip, let's multiply Brent Spiner by 3. This is from an episode I think called Brothers, and this is it's an introduction. We're getting deeper into lore, but also we're meeting Dr. Noonien Soon, who is the creator of Data. And what I love about this character, this scene, this episode particularly, is it takes a character like Data, who is inherently kind of a puzzle box on its own. The character is waiting to be explored narratively because it's this unique thing. There's this whole background about the planet that he's from. And this scene is a great opportunity, a great example of how the Next Generation really leans on the talent of its actors. I mean, even diving into episodes where Brent Spiner gets to play like a version of Sherlock Holmes, and get Patrick Stewart being able to flex his Shakespeare skills, doing a scene with Data on the holodeck. But this is great. You get Data doing Data. He plays his brother, Lore, this kind of evil twin brother, and an aging Dr. Noonien Soon, their creator, with a little bit of a twist at the end of the scene.
Both of your brains contain a simple homing device. Data's was activated purposefully. Yours, until you walked through that door, I had no idea you'd ever been reassembled. No thanks to you. But thanks to you, dear brother. I spent nearly 2 years drifting in space. If it hadn't been for a fortunate encounter with a pack-led trade ship, I'd still be out there. I had no alternative. You would have destroyed the Enterprise. Well, since I seem to be an uninvited guest at your little party, I'll leave you with your beloved son and be on my way. Lore, wait! There are questions I can answer. You'll have no chance to ask them later. You see, I'm dying.
Yeah, I love that scene. I love those characters. I love that interplay. And you know what else I love about that is the ambition. We were talking earlier about maybe the sets being a little chintzier, but when you are reaching for the stars, literally, with your production and the world that you're trying to present to people, I mean, it is a heavy lift. I love that they went for the ambition of the makeup, of selling. I mean, I got the two, Lore and Data were the same character, but I did not know for a long time that was Brent Spiner as well, and so it's a fun surprise. So the ambition of going through the cinematic trickery of making all those scenes work and taking the time to do that as this wonderful little side story to explore the character, I thought just really great and great drama that also plants the seeds for a narrative thread with Data's character that has only recently been resolved in some sense, without giving too many things away, in shows as recent as Picard. So they drew that out through movies. I mean, why would you want to let go of that character? But they managed to tell a story about that character over decades, and that's really impressive to me.
Hey, Michael, how hard is it for writers and creators to be able to go back to that episode and then kind of flesh it out later, 20, 25 years later?
I can't imagine the scene that must be taking place in the writer's room, the brainstorming and the index cards all over the bulletin board, trying to trace some of this stuff, because I know it's got to be difficult to, keep everything consistent, whether it be just continuity wise with the story or whatever. But I think they did a good job there. That was a good reminder of the Noonien Soon character, who Ben mentioned, does come up in Picard season 1. So, and it's something that they needed to be able to explore further. And when you're building franchise entry after franchise entry, being able to stay consistent sometimes requires you to cross timelines and play with time and space a little bit. But with Data, certainly they kept it pretty consistent throughout. And he's always that fish out of water. He originally was designed as a kind of a replacement for the Spock character in the original series, who was an observer of human emotion. Data filled that same role, and they tried to do that for other series as well, including the Virtual Doctor and Voyager and other things like that. But no one did it as good as Data, I think. I mean, Spock was a whole different character unto his own, but Data did it the best.
Well, with Spock, you had this conflict because it was about his humanity, versus that other side, that logic. And Data's whole pursuit is he's trying to become more human. And I think that's one of the ways in which Star Trek kind of asks a lot of questions of our society. Is like, is this android trying to be more of a good person than I am? Like, it's a beautiful journey, really watching him try to understand what it is to be a human being and why you would even want to do that.
Well, there are two examples that popped into my head when you were talking about that. One was when Q gave him a laugh. Yeah.
Oh,
that scene.
I love that. He's sitting at the command station in the front. It's towards the end of the episode. It's a little gift. He wants to turn him into a human. And he's like, no, I'm going to be on my journey. And then that's another great opportunity. And there's a moment similar to, I think this is really how Star Trek has inspired me, because the film that was just in Boston Sci-Fi, A Lone Star Love, is about a android, Aviva, that is essentially like a social media kind of robot. And, in order to make use of this amazing actress, Annetta Bening, who is a beautiful performer and a dancer, you trap this beautiful actor inside a robot performance. You want to show what's inside. And so I tried to find ways as I developed the script in this film where she gets to kind of play other little roles as though there's another social media voice coming out of her. You're getting messages from other people. So that one moment, we haven't seen that many moments like that from Brent Spiner up in that series up to that point. But when that laugh, he goes, ha, 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 he throws his head back, it becomes this big boy. It's kind of funny at first, like he's figuring out how to laugh, and it becomes this big boy. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it, because it's a very joyful moment in the series.
And then the next one, and Michael, maybe you can talk about this, is when Alice Krige, as the Borg Queen, gets him to feel pain. He either laughs or he feels pain. I mean, I think that was really interesting.
Yeah, well, it's difficult to remember that sometimes, especially because they're exploring the Data lore, as it were, no pun intended, with his brother, but in Picard, and how Dr. Newsom developed this technology and everything, and the androids that appear in Picard. A lot of that stuff came from outside sources, like the Borg Queen and like Q. It's like there's only so much that an emotional chip can handle. Some of it just has to come with experience with other life forms.
So I wonder what you have something to say.
No, I thought that was beautiful, Michael. I really like that sentiment.
So now I just want to kind of show you mentioned this before, Michael, that Ben looks a little like Jonathan Frakes, and hold on, we've got a clip for you. Just imagine Ben instead of Jonathan Frakes in this clip.
Right now, I'm on the bridge of the toughest, fastest, most powerful ship Starfleet has ever put into service. And I've got a fleet of them at my back. We've got our phasers locked on your warp cores. And nothing would make me happier than you giving me an excuse to kick your treacherous Tal Shiar ass. But instead, I'm going to ask you one time to stand down.
So, Ben, I see this as your pickup line in a bar.
Stand down one more time.
No, it was the treacherous ass part that.
Right.
But it's interesting because my impression of Jonathan Frakes, first of all, I mean, anyone who's as successful as this, you got to respect and you have to understand it. But he doesn't have a great range as an actor. I think he came on board originally because he was tall, good looking, and he was going to be some sort of some sort of tension release kind of guy. But he's really developed himself into a fine little director, hasn't he?
I mean, I know you have like Alexander Kurtzman, these, there are, Gene Roddenberry before he passed, these sort of shepherds of the series. But Jonathan, he, to me, is like the guy that carries the tome of things. He's directed so many movies, so many episodes of different series. I feel like he really understands it. And why I'm glad that he's so involved with the latest season of Picard is because, as the franchise evolves, you kind of see the Star Warsification of things. And I think Jonathan brings back the thing that we all probably fell in love with about Star Trek, that that next gen scoop, that Voyager world, that bit of logic and challenge, and really, really interesting episodes. As far as him as a director goes, I think we're really used to celebrating like directors that have a really strong stylistic point of view. And when it comes to television directing, that is not about expressing your voice. That is about serving the story and the showrunner's vision and whatnot like that. So to that end, I give him, 5 stars, because I think he's really continued the vision that Gene Roddenberry was sending forth for us all. So I'm glad for it.
Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, I've always been an admirer of Jonathan Frakes, and every time he appears in the credits of a series, even if it's not science fiction, because he's done like quite a few Dean Devlin series, Leverage in particular. He did a lot of episodes of Leverage, but he's done episodes of Star Trek Discovery. He's done episodes of Star Trek Picard. So, he's got a pretty deep field now in television. So I don't think anyone can argue with his resume in that respect, despite him not necessarily appearing on screen as much after Star Trek: The Next Generation went off the air.
When we look at, say, Star Trek versus Star Wars versus the Marvel comic universe, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the Marvel Cinematic Universe had it all laid out in comic books. And, Star Trek really didn't. And so there are times when things had to be explained, and they were explained weirdly. And I want to show you a clip of that where we find out something about Klingons.
Let be, boys, and don't ask for Raptagino. If I have to say we don't carry that one more time. The Klingons.
Klingons?
Over there and over there.
Those are Klingons?
All right. You boys have had enough.
Mr. Worf?
They are Klingons. And it is a long story.
What happened? Some kind of genetic engineering? A viral mutation?
We do not discuss it with outsiders.
I love that. I had not
great.
seen that episode. I never saw that episode, so this was a revelation for me. But I love that they're not going to explain it. They're not going to explain it for Discovery either. Discovery changed the Klingon look quite a bit. You just have to accept it.
Well,
I love that.
It was a fun clip. But now let's get a little serious here for a second. Why has Star Trek survived? I mean, shows go in and out of favor all the time. Sometimes the pendulum swings one way and then it swings the other way. Then they get rediscovered again. But this has been pretty consistently since 1966 that there's been a Star Trek thing going on. That there's been 14 movies, 14 movies, 12 shows. But that's a pretty big franchise. Why is it succeeding?
Well, I think there's first something that needs to be acknowledged about the the gunpowder behind the franchise being able to keep shooting towards the stars, to continue the metaphor, is that once a property gets to a certain point in the media landscape that we have now, a known IP quantity, right, is just something that it is goldmine ready to be drawn from, and executives are obsessed for it. So I think that, when CBS, Viacom, Paramount Plus now, the overlord of Paramount Plus, having control of these properties, looking for opportunities to get a new generation interested. I think there's a double-edged sword there. Okay, that comes with new ideas, changes to the franchise, but it also gives opportunities for the old ideas to come back, So I think if you divide Star Trek into these kind of 3 phases, with this sort of 80s, 90s rebirth being the second phase, the original Star Trek and the films, the films that were kind of leading into Next Generation. And then this newer phase now that was sort of kicked off by J.J. Abrams and the Kelvin timeline films as a way of reaching a new audience, a different point of view visually, leaning into more action sequences. But the real reason the real reason that Star Trek has stayed around is because people need something good to believe in, I think. People want to be challenged as well. I think that we live in a world where there's a lot of chaos right now. It challenges us in a lot of different ways. And Star Trek always presented us with complicated ideas, whether they were emotionally complicated about the way we live in our culture and society, or just intellectually complicated about the way we perceived our very existence in the world. I think that Star Trek challenged us in ways, and it also invited us to be a better person. And I think people want that. People always are looking for that. And there haven't been a lot of franchises that offer that. I mean, people compare it a lot to Star Trek, but Star Wars. But Star Wars is doing something very different and is in a lot of ways much darker, of course. So I think it's the optimism, the positivity, and challenging people to be better. I think that's why people keep coming back to Star Trek.
What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, I think, and that's one of the things that Gene Roddenberry insisted upon for a long time, that later creators have been able to play around with, but it's the world building. If it wasn't for the world building that was in place ahead of time, specifically the optimism, because of course, nowadays you have a lot of post-apocalyptic shows in science fiction that are very dark and dreary, and very few have that hopeful look forward. And when you see our own current world in context, from the eyes of the characters, Picard did this very recently, where they came back to our time and saw some of the way people were living in squalor, and the quality wasn't there. That, oh, this is before all the advances that civilization made with the Federation and, you know, the world vision in general. You know, it's just something that gives people hope to keep moving forward in any generation, whether it be the 60s, the 90s, or currently. It always resonates in that sense. And, you know, when you have a generation in the 60s that was looking towards the moon landing, of course, and they thought that they were going to be reaching the stars very quickly after that, colonizing the solar system. That didn't happen, but there's always that hope, especially among science fiction fans, that we're going to reach that next frontier. And hopefully that will still happen. But when you have Star Trek holding the carrot out there in front of you, it's always going to be enticing.
I mean,
go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say my most recent project that is just starting to get out of the world is called Xero Method, and it's a TV series, it's a pilot. And even though that is a dark, dystopian, cyberpunk, time travel, action adventure story, I couldn't help but be influenced by the lighter side of things in Star Trek, by some of the intellectualism and backboning some of the real world sci-fi elements about how time travel works, things like that. I just think it goes to show that even me as an artist responding to this world and being compelled, like, you know what, my next project, I'm going to tell a darker story that kind of is reflective about this world. Even me, I'm called back to my roots about the things that I want to go towards. We respond to our world as artists, but it's also important to, like Gene Roddenberry did, to create a vision for people that is positive.
Well, our final clip that before we leave, and I wanted to show this final clip. And what I love about it is that it goes back to that humor that is in Star Trek. And in this clip, we have two protagonists meeting another protagonist with a time portal.
If she really went back, then who's been here with us for this past minute?
We have so many selves. There's a version of you that's breathing your last breath in a mirror universe. But that version doesn't fit so well anymore, does it?
Oh, I thought you said going through the door would help her.
Can't just live in doorways.
Who are you? Really?
Really?
I am the guardian of forever.
Eat your heart out, Q.
Really? I mean, seriously, that is so hokey. I mean, it's wonderful, and it's good actor and all that, and a great special effect, but that's so hokey.
Well, I love the fact that
all right, go ahead, Michael.
Well, they have a darker tone in Star Trek Discovery as a general rule, And so when they can throw something in like that, that just gives you, harkens back. I mean, the outfit that the guy has on, the cigar,
Yeah.
everything, that plays to the spirit of Star Trek, even in a wackadoodle show like Star Trek Discovery, which can go off the rails sometimes. So I love that they are willing to do something like that, even with the modern sensibilities of the current
really
Star Trek
yeah.
franchise.
Yeah, it's a great juxtaposition. I think it's like it's not fan service is not the right word. It's honoring the DNA of the series to have a moment like that, and something that looks beautiful. I mean, that is just some good movie making on TV. That is great stuff. And even when they're kind of doing this echoey, kind of almost corny effect, they have this beautiful line that is deeply impactful right before it. You can't stay in doorways, the guy says. I mean, you must pass through these gates, right? You can't stay in the in-between. And obviously a big theme in that moment right there.
Is that something that one of the reasons why we do like Star Trek, because it does tell us these things. It's a morality play that it's constantly reminding us of what we should be doing as human beings, that we should be rising to our better selves.
Well, yeah, that's true, especially as we go through the 60s to the 90s and beyond. But what I love about the current iterations of Star Trek is they're not afraid to have the characters go through an evolution, a growth, more so than I think in some of the earlier franchise entries, because there are flaws. And so I think Star Trek's optimism can have a negative side, and that is that there's not as much evolution among the characters because they're already, so perfect or whatever. But Michael Burnham goes through a lot of evolution in Star Trek Discovery, and when even some of the animated franchises that are out now, Star Trek Lower Decks comes right out and says the people in charge are not perfect. And sometimes the only people that really see that are the people working behind the scenes.
We have a clip of that.
Oh, okay.
And Mark can pull it up. We'll show that clip. That's a perfect. It gives us a perfect example of what you just said.
This can all be over if you just tell me what your bridge crew did.
We can't tell you.
Why? Why?
Because we don't know. We never know anything. We're lower decks. No one ever tells us what's going on. We're not important enough to have anything to lie to you about.
You're Starfleet. Surely you must be briefed on every contingency.
Yeah, I wish. The senior officers don't always have time to keep us up to speed. Hell, sometimes they don't even know what's going on.
Impossible! Human lies! You are the best of the best! Your senior officers are always in full control!
No, they're not. They mess up all the time.
They should use that in the promo material.
Yeah, right? Like, I'm ready to watch that show now, That's not completely a kid's show. I'm down with that.
Anyways, we got to wrap up here. We're running out of time. Will the 5-year mission go another 50 years?
Oh yeah. In this day and age when everything is about franchises and Star Trek has already capitalized on it in the 90s. And in the 90s, it wasn't even a popular thing to do these reboots. Now it's like all the rage. So yeah, I don't think Star Trek's going anywhere anytime soon.
I definitely think it'll be around for a long time. I mean, going back to the well with Picard, and giving the franchise that boost, that sort of nostalgia boost, has provided opportunities for a show like Lower Decks to kind of give them cover a little bit, to find its audience, to grow the franchise. I think you're going to start to see these shows come into their own, really explore new and interesting ideas. And what's going on in Lower Decks there, like, that's really what Star Trek is about. No matter what decade it is, or what cast or what crew it is, Star Trek holds up a mirror to our society, and it deals with what's going on today, those conflicts, whether it was, Klingons being like a proxy for communists, or this way, or the ills in our society right now. Like, that's Star Trek's going to do that. And as long as Star Trek does that for society, people will want more Trek.
All right. Well, I got to do a little bit of business here. When you do a podcast, you're supposed to do a call to action. And so this is the time when I do the call to action, which is, folks, if you're listening to this and you're enjoying what we're talking about, Boston Science Fiction Film Festival, issue number 78 or 48 will be in February of 2023, starting on the 15th. You can buy tickets at bostonscifi.com. We will have another podcast coming up on the 29th of April. It'll be the Streamers Strike Back, Sci-Fi on TV. And I want to thank our guests, Ben Myers and Michael Ayer. Ben, you said you're working on Xero Method, is that right?
Yes, it's a pilot for a series. It'll be coming out as a special digital series this summer. It's about time travel. It's a lot of fun. I went crazy on it. I wrote it, directed it, and I'm playing the lead. So we'll see how that goes. Maybe a little Jonathan Frakes. Yeah, maybe a little Jonathan Frakes can rub off on me a little bit. I'll get a little bit of his luck. But yeah, look for that, and you can follow that at Xero Method TV on Instagram.
And Michael, what are you doing right now?
Getting ready to review Russian Doll season 2 and gearing up for a bunch of interviews with the Stranger Things season 4 cast and crew. So I'm going to be writing a little bit about that and a couple of shows that I'm looking forward to as well. So look for me at denofgeek.com. I'm always writing about science fiction on that website.
Cool. All right, so we're going to close out, and we're going to close out with a very recent episode on the Star Trek thing, and I'm just going to leave it like that and just say that I love the idea that the president of Earth is someone we all know, and if we don't know, we should know. So thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you again. And again, thank you very much to Ben, Michael, and our director in the booth, Mark Sherwood. Good night.
Bringing the Federation back together again has been a great start. But there are countless worlds out there to still be explored. So many are looking for understanding, connection. Better tomorrow.
There's a lot of work to do. Are you ready for that?
I am. Let's get to it.